So on your soils map, if you flip it to that second page, so that soil description, so that first one, the number 4605, there's actually multiple ecological sites within that soil. Do you see that? So, well, how do you know which one to use? And that's where David was explaining we got to dig a hole to figure out which one to use. Because I noticed right over there behind the camera is rock. That's a sown soil. So if we look for a sown, this was that sown soil on that white, that only makes up 3%. So it's there, but within that complex, meaning that the way they mapped it, it's not cut and dry, that's what soil it is. There's so many other dynamic properties happening that we got a little bit of sown creeping into there. So before we do take our clipping, or we need to dig a hole and make sure we're not on a different soil type. So I just wanted to point that out real quick because it is just right beside us. So knowing where to clip, that would be the first thing. So I picked my location. Yes, we are on a Labette soil. We are on a Loamy Hills ecological site. Now I need to look at what my relative value production is supposed to be. David said it was supposed to be 5,000 pounds per acre. So now we're going to compare it about what it actually is. So we use what are called clipping frames. And this is what I spend a lot of my time doing out in the field, is driving around pastures, taking clippings, figuring out what the actual production is out in a pasture. So this frame is exactly 1.92 square feet. And they make it that size because we need to convert it to pounds per acre. And to do that, we have a multiplier of 50. So they just pick that size to make the multiplier an easy value, 50. So we know our multiplier. So when we're looking at where to take our clipping, the first thing I'm looking at is what's been grazed. So we want total production for the year. We have to account for a lot of things if we're going to clip on June 11th, because we're trying to calculate what that production is going to be at the end of the growing season in October. The first variable we need to account for is what percent has been grazed. So I'm looking at the leaf tips. So if there's still leaf tips on here, I know that plant has not been grazed. But I think it was over here. Yep, here's some over here. Those leaf tips are flat. That plant has been grazed. So if we took a clipping right there, well, we could, but we have to account for that grass that's already been grazed. Well, how do you know how much production a cow's already eaten? It's hard to do, which is why I prefer just to choose a spot that has not been grazed at all. So that's what I'm going to figure out, is where they haven't been grazed. When I'm putting down this frame, that end is open, so I can easily slide it down into the ground. And all I got to worry about is this side. I want all that grass within that frame sticking straight up. Make sure we have all the grass in there. Okay. Some pastures have a pretty substantial residue load, and I don't want any of that residue from last year. So I'll take my fingers and I'll run my fingers through there and pull out all that dead thatch, because that'll skew our current production numbers. So once I have that done, I can start taking clippings. So if one of you don't mind holding the bag for me. So then we'll very carefully, without cutting the end of our fingers off, go clear to the ground. We want as much green leaf area as we can. We're just going to put it in the bag. As I'm clipping, I'm also noting percent composition of those grasses, because I need to know at what growth stage they're at. If I'm cutting a whole bunch of cool season grasses, is that going to be further along on our growth stage for cool season grasses? Yes. So I am noting we're cutting quite a bit of little blue stem and big blue stem. Both are warm season grasses. I do have some forbs, a little bit of forbs in there. I'm also clipping some sedges in there. If I picked an area that had a bunch of forbs like this in there, I would account for that composition. Our calculation is going to be different. So I would prefer to get mainly grass in my grass clipping or in my production clippings. All right, that looks pretty good. There's a few stragglers. I want to get as much as I can out of there. All right, if you want to fold that up, next thing is we're going to weigh it. And our scales are in grams. So we have a 300 gram scale that will measure the big stuff. I also have a 30 gram scale to measure individual species. So if I wanted to clip these out so they don't skew the production number, I'll measure those separately. Yep, so if I hold that, I'm going to be looking on this side. I'm going to be looking at the line. Gotta block our wind a little bit. So that is 80, 88, not quite 90. So I'm going to say 88 grams.
Can I pause you?
All right, so 88 grams, but that was with the bag. I know the bag weighs 15 grams. So 88 take away 15 is, someone said it, 73. Yep. All right, now we'll start recording. So I got a piece of paper. I don't have enough for everybody, but if we got a couple people recording with clipboards. All right, so let's go through the calculation. Our grams clipped would be our first one, so 73 grams. Our next column, percent air dry value. So if you didn't know what percent to use, you would take this bag back to the office, back home, and you would dry this out. All you got to do is set it on a table, give it a week or so, let all that moisture evaporate, and you'd have a dry weight matter. But since we don't have time to do that, we know that all that grass is still in the vegetative state, meaning it hasn't started sending up stalks yet. We have a pretty good idea that our percent dry weight is 35%. So 0.35 would go in that next column. So we're going to take our 73 grams times 0.35, gives us a dry weight of 25.6. So that'll go in that next column, 25.6. And what's the next column? Yeah, so that multiplier goes there. And remember what that multiplier was? That number? So that was the 50. So the 50 goes right there, because that's based on what size of frame we have. So we'll take that, the 25.6 times our 50, gives us 1,280 pounds per acre right here. And that's current production, but we want annual production. So we have to come up with those variables, and that's where we start adding in those variables. So the first one is percent growth, right? Is that the next one? Yep. Okay, so we're gonna look at our growth curve in our tall grasses, and we're gonna say beginning of June, we're about 45% of the way complete. So it's gonna be 0.45 in that percent grown category. Now, if I was clipping all cool season grasses, that number may be, what, 80%, because it's already done. There's not much growing happening on the cool season grasses. That makes sense? Okay. Our next variable, percent ungrazed. Let's pretend we chose a spot that was not grazed. So that would be 100. So just put 100, none of it is ungrazed. Okay, our next one, next variable, normal growth. That takes into account our climate. We can have really dry years or really wet years. We want an average. So if it was in a really wet year, we would knock that number down. If it was in a really dry year, we try to bump that number up because we want a general average production. This has been a normal year. So I would say we don't need to adjust that at all. Let's leave that at 100. All the 100s cancel themselves out. So that's pretty easy math. So for column, so the last column, that would be column J, you would look down at that table and there is a calculation for that. I don't like that calculation. There's a lot going on right there. The 100s cancel out. All we got to worry about is that 0.45. So we'll take the current production, which was 1,280, and divide it by 0.45. Gives us an annual production of 2,844. So that's what we can expect if we come back here in October after everything's growing. That's what we would expect to grow. What was the relative value production number? 5,000. David already mentioned we'd probably be a lot lower, didn't he? So he called that. He was right. What did you guys get on your average production on the grazing stick? Do you remember? What?
2,100.
Okay. Was that current? Was that calculating current production or was that annual production? Do you remember? That was current? Okay. Okay. And we only took one clipping. Ideally, we'd take 10 to 15 clippings and get an average value, but that allows us to start making decisions, right? If we're expecting 5,000 pounds per acre and we're only getting 2,800 pounds per acre, what does that mean for our stocking rates? They need to go down. Yep. And I was already getting clues as I was walking into this pasture of those indicator species. So I was talking about increasers and decreasers. This right here is an increaser. Ironweed, cows do not like this. If you look behind us, there's a lot of ironweed out here. I can already tell this was heading in a downward trend, meaning adjustments will probably need to be made on the stocking rates. That makes sense? Okay. Questions on calculations?
How did you come up with the number 50 for the multiplier?
That multiplier was based on the size of the frame. We used the 1.92 square foot plot frame, which means our multiplier is 50.